Halloween is the direct sequel to the classic Halloween from 1978, and this time around, Jamie Lee Curtis is back, and this is 40 years later. It's been 40 years since the first one, which is kind of hard to believe. So you and I both anticipated this movie a lot. We've been talking about it, we've been thinking about it, we've been looking forward to it. So we can agree that Halloween is one of your favorite movies, right?
Oh, it's my favorite horror movie of all time.
Yeah. So there was a lot of stakes for this one, for you. I mean, I think the first one is just a tough act to follow in general. It's very
for
bold
any, not only a sequel, but any other slasher movie, that's a tough act to follow.
Right, exactly. And the one thing that I love about the original Halloween is really the stalking dread of it leading up to the kills that are to come. You know, I think that has one of the best sort of building first couple acts of any horror movie. Do you think that this one has followed in that same vein?
When it comes to the first act, not so much. I would say the first act of this movie is where most, if not all, of my problems lie. I feel like there are some moments where like there's organic dialogue that's somewhat expositionary. Like they've never met this person before. They're giving themselves some backstory, and it is in an interview setting. So I like how they were able to get around that like expository dialogue, you know, kind of make it feel a little bit more organic.
Yeah.
But there's like, I feel like this first act of this movie is like, let's catch you up on everything over the last 40 years before we really get into the action.
Right.
But once we get into the action, that's when this movie really took off for me. How about you?
Yeah, I think so too. I enjoyed the first act for the most part, but it didn't build like the first one, the dread sort of like the first one does.
Like the lingering doom.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. There was some exposition where I was like, this is a little too on the nose, because I think they tried to really build Michael Myers up for the mythology that he's already built for himself. I think most people seeing this movie knows the first movie. They know what Michael Myers is. You know, he's evil incarnate. He kills for no reason. We don't really know why, but for some reason they seemed like they needed to hammer this home a little bit too hard in the first act. So I agree with it, but then again, I like when people talk about Michael and how evil he is. So I'm a little split on the first act. But all in all, I didn't have too many problems with it.
I mean, but all that aside, from the first act, you know, this is a horror movie. This is all about the scares. So how do you feel they executed the scares? I mean, this was directed by David Gordon Green, who's mostly known for comedies and drama. I mean, this guy directed all the Real Girls, and he also directed Pineapple Express. So he spread, you know, all out, and this is his first horror movie. So how do you think he did handling the scares?
I saw an interview with him, and he was talking about how this is his first horror movie, and what he wanted to do was get as much coverage as possible. He said, you know, they were constantly shooting every angle, every single thing they could do to use for this movie, so they knew that it would have the right feel and that it would flow well enough to be a very effective, scary horror movie. I think that this movie is a very effective slasher. There are some very creative set pieces, some very creative shots in this that are reminiscent of the original Halloween. He lets the camera linger. He lets Michael be in the background. He lets you wait for these things to happen, and I think it's great. I think they did a good job, but I really didn't find it to be all that scary. What about you?
I think this was a very tense movie. So, you know, there are those moments like, when's he going to pop out? You know, when are we going to get a clue that he's somewhere? Yeah. And then there's this also this great moment in a field where the motion sensor lights keep going on and off, and Michael's, you know, just kind of scattered all over the place.
Yes.
So I really like that. I think there are some very effective, scary, and even more effective tension building moments. Yeah. But I will agree with you that overall I can't say I found this movie to be like all that scary.
Yeah, same
or as
here.
It could have been even.
Or as it could have been, yeah, I agree. And I think that also goes to some of the plot choices they chose with this. I think that there's a lot of emphasis on this, on everybody, not everybody, but a lot of characters in this want to figure out Michael. They want to figure out his reasoning. Why does he kill these people? Why did he do that 40 years ago? Why won't he speak? Everyone's just like, speak, say something, tell us. And I feel like there's a lot of emphasis on that through this movie, where everyone's just trying to get him. You know, they're almost keeping him alive on purpose just so they can find out some reasoning out of him, you know? And there is a plot choice in this movie that I thought they were going to go one way with it, and I was like, please no. Please don't do this. And they didn't. And they fixed it. And I was like, okay.
Say no more. I already know what you're talking about, and I'm glad that they did it.
Yeah, me too.
But, you know, going into the third act where, you know, it's basically Laurie versus Michael. It's this, you know, big setup, like, you know, not only have the last 40 years been building up to this, but the whole movie's been building up to this.
It has, yeah.
And how do you feel like they handled the cat and mouse between the two of them at the end?
I really like the third act. But the third act is my favorite part of this movie.
Yeah, easily. The same for me. In fact, there are some moments. There's definitely, you know, tons of little Easter eggs and homage to the original in this one.
Yeah, and they do touch base on the psychology of someone enduring such a tragic thing in their
Right.
childhood, and like how it can affect them to turn into this cat and mouse type of thing. And yeah, the third act is where this movie totally shines. It had me on the edge of my seat, and I really liked the leading up of how Laurie, the character of Laurie, has been, borderline looking forward to this, and she is
Right.
prepared, and you get to see what she is prepared for this. And there are some interesting and clever things that she's thought of over the 40 years she had to sit on this, and I thought it was a great payoff.
Yeah, and I like how this movie was able to keep you on the edge of your seat because you get these characters, and usually in a horror movie, these characters get killed off or one scene before they get killed. Not very well established characters, but they establish some characters, and they're not afraid to kill them off in this movie. I mean,
Yeah.
there are some deaths that really surprised me in this one, and so I was very, even though I can't say the scares themselves were all that there for me,
Yeah.
it was keeping me on the edge of the seat by showing off pretty early that no one's safe. Like there are these established characters you've seen through the majority of the movie. They're gone.
Yeah, and I think that some of the established characters were, established well. There is some plot with one of the main characters and her boyfriend that just sort of gets thrown to the wayside, and
It seemed like an excuse to get her out of the house and then have her come back alone.
Yeah,
like,
basically her to get lost is
Right.
what it was there for, and it was effective in that way, but I felt like that was a little bit of a throwaway. Aesthetically, though, I will say that I think Michael Myers' mask is the best it's ever looked in this film.
Yeah, and I like, and speaking of the aesthetic, I like that they use like the old font and the old, kind of like the old graphics.
Like you said, they're not afraid to kill off certain characters, and they're not afraid to kill a lot of people. I like that
More kills in this one than the first.
Way more. There's a ton of kills in this movie, and I think they establish it well that it's almost like once Michael gets started, he can't really stop. There was a lot of times where I'm like, why is he even killing that person? Why is he even there? I'm like, oh, it's because
It's just all random.
this is what he does.
Right.
He sees something and he wants to go for it, and he does, type of thing. And I think that they captured the essence of Michael being like a creature of nature. He's a monster. That's all he is. And I wish he would have got the mask a little bit earlier. I didn't really like him walking around without it. But other than that, like, I think they made Michael the way I wanted him to be in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that with the stalking kills, I think there are some really great moments of that where, especially when it's all done in one shot. There's
So cool.
a shot of a window where a woman's inside. You know what I'm talking about. And I
That's
thought
my favorite.
That
kill.
was
Yeah.
a great sequence, nice long takes, and I think David Gordon Green did a good job. Letting these scenes breathe a little bit more.
And just a little shout out to this little kid that this girl's babysitting in. Man, was he good!
He stole every second he was on screen.
I really like that little kid. He was a great addition to this. There's little trinklets of Danny McBride's humor throughout this movie.
Oh yeah,
There's a cop conversation that was very
that
funny.
I swear that was like Franco and McBride in that car. That's what it sounded
really
like to me.
Yeah, so I think that it does offer you a little bit of relief. That's what a horror movie should do. It should tension, let you breathe a little bit, then build the tension.
Cool you
again.
off a
nice
little comedy.
up and down, exactly. And I think they handled that pretty well.
I agree.
Buffs.
All right, Nate, so we share our thoughts on Halloween, some things we liked, some things we didn't like, but go ahead. Do you recommend it?
I enjoyed myself watching Halloween. I would say that it met my expectations, which my expectations were fairly high for this movie. I was a little bit, wary of the whole thing, but I was excited for it, and I walked out of there pretty happy, and I think that this might have topped, this is my favorite sequel of the Halloween series. I think it beats H2O for me. So I'm definitely going to say, if you're a fan of horror movies, the Halloween series, see it.
I agree that if you are a fan of horror movies, especially if you're a fan of the Halloween series, even though they retconned every single sequel since,
Which is fine.
This one, yeah, exactly. This one definitely pays off, and there are some minor complaints about it, but effective. I think this is probably one of the better scary movies to come out in October in recent years. So I will definitely give a see it.
So that's our review of Halloween. Have you seen it? Are you planning on seeing it? What is your favorite of the Halloween sequels? Leave all your comments down below.
And be sure to join me next week as I bring you my review for A Star is Born. I slipped in the theater the other day and caught that one and dying to tell you guys all about it. So I'll bring you that review next week. But remember, no matter where you are, no matter who you're with,
Watch more movies.